March 29th, 2025. Welcome to This Week in Waukesha, the podcast series, the new podcast series. I am your host, Downtown Donnie Brown, coming to you from the office of former Alderman Don Paul Brown here in our beloved Banting Park home. I am joined by the extraordinary young producer, the mighty Max Martinson, at our WAUK studios in Radio Park on Victory Drive, excuse me. And we have another guest that's running for elected office. This is Stephanie Fidlin, a candidate for our School District of Waukesha board. Stephanie, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So glad you can join us. And as Stephanie
Yeah, thanks for
knows, it
having me.
was a rather interesting week with the Freeman article relating to my podcast and another school board candidate, Sam D'Amico, and his educational status. And well, we're glad we're having a lot of listeners. It's unfortunate that it's really there's been too deep of a dive in such a very pedantic issue, and of course, I accept my responsibility for the mistakes I made in contributing to that. But this is about Stephanie. But Stephanie, because you share, you're running kind of as a on the same platform with Sam and with Angelique Byrne, wanted to give you an opportunity to just kind of speak out on all the big spotlight surrounding Sam's status as a student or
Yeah,
non-student.
I think, like I mentioned in the Freeman, he's met all the legal requirements to appear on the ballot. He's completed classes. He's waiting to walk in June for commencement. And again, I just think he's an incredibly ambitious young person who's stepped up to take on a big challenge like this and represent students on the board. And so, yeah, I think he has a unique voice. So,
Sounds great. And I like that emphasis on unique voice. And I thought that's what I found intriguing about his candidacy and what he brings to the table. But again, this is now about you. Stephanie, for our viewers, is a registered nurse and a certified emergency nurse. She has three children in the Waukesha School District. Slow down, Don. And has been active in her PTO for the last 9 years and is a former co-president, which I think is also a unique body of experience, given that I don't know if as many parents are involved in the parent teacher organizations at their respective children's schools. But so Stephanie, why tell us why you want to, what is your why do you want to run, as your website says?
yeah. So, like you mentioned, I've been involved in PTO work since my oldest started 4K. And so that's been a lot of, fundraising and volunteering. And then as I, had gotten more into it, I eventually ended up leading as co-president. And that's really, organizing a lot of events and things, which is really to get families engaged with the students and the teachers and in school and things like that, which I think is what we need more of really is that parental engagement piece. But then not a huge piece of PTO is fundraising. And so that's, working to identify needs of things that are in the school that there may not be a budget for and how we can, raise funds for that. One of the projects that I'm the most proud of at Summit View, the playground equipment was coming up on end of life. And so it took 3 years and a lot of fundraising and a lot of events and a lot of organizing with the community, like restaurant give back nights and silent auctions, soliciting donations for that to put together events. But, we fundraised over $100,000 to build a new playground for Summit View. And
Wow.
I'm very proud to have my family's name on the plaque there with
You
that.
raised over
So
a
it
hundred
took
grand for that playground, is that what you said?
as part of the PTO,
Or
like
the
as
PT,
part of,
yeah.
and I was
But still,
co-president for 2 years, but it was
the
many families.
organization raised 100,000. I
The
apologize for, yeah.
organization raised over a hundred
That's
thousand dollars. Yep.
incredible.
So,
Yeah,
yep.
congrats.
And,
That's
we received grants, worked with community partnerships and, businesses and things like that to, to close all the gaps. But it was a lot of just grassroots fundraising. It was a lot of families donating and things like that, whether it was events that we were organizing or restaurant give back nights where we, throw it out to the whole community to come in and stuff. It was just a lot of organizing. And again, I was part of a team and I helped lead part of that team. And it took many years and many hands, but we did get that playground built. And every time my kids play on it, I'm just so proud to see, just all the kids just enjoying that. And a large part of that playground, I will mention, was that it was built to make sure that it was inclusive for all students. because students in wheelchairs typically had to stay on the
Multi-ability.
blacktop. And so, yep.
Hmm.
And so this playground was built with the thought in mind. It's 360. So there's ramps and pieces so that even kids of all abilities can interact with all the features of the playground. And that's really important.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned playgrounds, and we won't stay on this too long. But when I was on the council, I was concerned about the playgrounds in our neighborhood that the Banting and Horning schools share, and I was very active in our parks because we have quite a few parks in our district, which we're proud of. And the city, as I understood it, the parks had reached out to the school leadership, not necessarily the board, but about partnerships where the parks department would flip the bill for renovating, updating that playground space. And as I understood that there was no response or maybe even a rejection from the school leadership. Is that something that you, as a candidate, would be willing to address if you're elected to the school board?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the more partnerships we can build, the better. So I think that is something that we could look at. But I think that, if the city's already maintaining parks, maybe they would have, there could be like opportunities to build partnerships to, whether it's replacing equipment or ideas about maintaining equipment. But I would, it would be something that we could explore for sure. So.
Fantastic, thanks. And then going back to the platform as promoted in your campaign literature that's been distributed through direct mail, one of these key issues is demanding transparency in tax dollar use, long-term planning, and preventing school closures. Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah. So I think that, again, it's just the more that we can bring the community into this stuff and bring the key stakeholders in and, just make things more transparent, that's always for the best. We need the community to be aware of the challenges that schools are facing right now in terms of funding. We've talked a lot in this campaign about the need for fair funding for special education and reimbursement. Public schools are getting 30% reimbursement for special education,
Hmm.
and private schools are getting 90%, and that's taxpayer dollars.
Wow.
And so, the fight is on for fair funding. And in Madison, that looks like getting public schools to 60%. But for Waukesha schools, that's $10 million.
Hmm.
So that could close a gap for us in the budget because we do have some budget challenges ahead, and they are going to have to look at, the buzzword right now is right sizing the schools. But it's calling it what it is. It's addressing declining enrollment and closing schools.
Okay.
And then the Department of Education closing for the School District of Waukesha, that's an $8 million plus budget gap that's coming if those federal funds are held up. So the School District of Waukesha, that's $8 million. That's 56 full time, 56 or 59, I believe, full time, positions that will need to be cut, and that's important. So as we start to look at that stuff, we need long range plans, and those long range plans mean informing the community and bringing the community in so they have the awareness of that, so that we have time to get feedback of, okay, if we did need to close a school, what would the impact on this community be? Because when they made the decision to close Whittier, that decision was made from a financial standpoint, and the
Mm,
community was informed at the last minute. And so then you didn't get a chance to get that feedback of what would the actual impacts of this be. I know that for Hadfield, the parking, there's not enough parking for
yeah.
the merge of the schools. So the neighborhood around it is inundated. Those
Mm,
taxpayers have this huge, impact every day at drop off and pickup of all these cars in the streets and everything. So those are some of the things that I think that it's important to bring people in early on that. When we talk about transparency, we talk about making the community aware, getting that feedback, conducting those surveys that they used to do and things like that, so that we can know what do the people want, and you can operate from that accountability standpoint.
interesting. Another platform is expand elective offerings to meet future job needs, particularly in STEM careers. And it seems, I would think that that's a unanimous front from all sides that they want to promote STEM education and related careers. And I certainly applaud that. But what about all the other educational offer? I guess some people call them the soft, but history is very important to me. Um, English, effective writing and communication, arts, all those. how do we balance that and kind of keep those other programs on the forefront, or at least make a case for them being relevant?
Yeah, I mean, the most concrete example I can give is this. I have a fifth grader. He's at Summit View, and Summit View fifth grade has a long, great tradition of doing the wax museum. The fifth grader chooses a person that they want to be their project for the living wax museum, and it can be a celebrity, it can be a historical figure, it has to be a real person. And they do a project where they study that person, they write a paper about the biography of their life, um, and they have to memorize a short little piece. And then they, dress in costumes. So they help design their own costume of what they're going to wear. And then the families and grandparents come in and, press the button, and then they give their little speech, of the person's life. And it's a living wax museum. It's a wonderful project. It incorporates so many different elements: their writing, their public speaking, the creativity of the costume and the design, and all these things. But as the district moved to this lockstep curriculum, and they've, said, we have this science-backed, lockstep curriculum. Now all fifth grade classes across the district have to be doing the same thing at the same time. So some of you is not holding the wax museum this year. And I've got
Mm.
one kid who has learned every fact possible about Michael J. Fox, who is bummed. And
Uh,
it
love
it's
Michael
so
J. Fox.
hard because yeah, because
A great
he
Canadian,
saw
by
his
the way. Excuse
yes,
me.
he saw his sister do this project. And again, it's a great project, and he was like, he declared who he wanted to be in fourth grade and was like, don't take my person. But again, I think that really just speaks to, it sounds good on paper, this idea of lockstep curriculum, but taking away that autonomy, what are you losing? And so this was, you lost a great opportunity for a really great project that would have engaged, the students in, again, multifaceted learning. You're talking about writing, reading, public speaking, just all these different things. They created a poster board that had to go along with it that you could read, when you went to the museum. And so, I think that you need to explore those kinds of things. And those are situations where if we were asking those questions of like, what would be the impact, we would see all the great opportunities that we're going to lose. So,
Mhm. Terrific. Thank
but
you for
so
sharing.
when you talk about, bringing more opportunities in the way of STEM and stuff like that, I think that, we have the STEM middle school and this, opportunity, and the STEM elementary. Where can we be expanding those opportunities, whether it's creating more things like that or developing other things, in
Mhm.
addition to that? Because I think
Mm.
that ultimately we want to be giving more opportunities, not taking things away.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Um, a lot of discussion, or this is a big platform item, is fostering parental engagement and feedback to strengthen the partnership between schools and families. Give us your take on that.
Yeah, so the other side talks a lot about parental rights. And they say, the parents, we have to have parental rights and all that stuff. Parents have always had rights, and parents still have rights. I think what's far more important is the parental engagement. And I think I see a lot of that through my work with PTO. But even as I worked to help develop the district-wide parent teacher coalition, and so that's all the PTOs and all the PTAs of the 13 elementary schools. And so we bring parents in and we start saying, how can we make the schools better? What can we do? What's the need? What are teachers saying they need? What supports do they need to be able to do the job better? Or there's resources, it's a gap, like where we can either fundraise for these things, or leverage community partnerships to get these things done. And so I think that that's the parental engagement piece that's far more important than parental rights.
Mhm.
Because if you just look at education as 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. and that's it, that's not, school has to, there has to be the parental engagement piece on the back end. When
Mhm.
kids are coming home, is someone reading with them in the evenings? Are they getting extra help if they have, needs with math and things like that? And if it's not happening with families, are they getting plugged into tutoring or things like that? So, I mean, that's the parental engagement piece. It
Sure.
doesn't really help to just say like, well, I'm a parent and I have rights. Well, of course you do. Like,
Mhm.
and nobody's questioning that. The question is whether or not you're engaging in it. So,
Okay. Yeah, and you raise a good point about this parental rights thing. It seems to speak to if a fear that parents have that what's being taught or what's being promoted by teachers or is contrary to their religious or political beliefs. And how do we address that effectively so parents can feel at ease or um, have some sort of, I don't want to say compromise, but just a notion that your kids won't be proselytized by what's being shared in the classroom and what's being promoted by the teachers.
I think if, parents have concerns, I think one of the best things that they could do is volunteer. Every classroom has needs, whether it's, stapling things or reading, one-on-one like reading buddies I did in second grade. Every classroom has a need for a volunteer. So if you
Hmm.
have real concerns about what's happening, you should reach out to the teacher and get involved because I think that you'll see that teachers, they're doing the very best they can. They're there teaching to kids, many levels, whether the kid needs help and they're struggling and they're trying to, get them on track. And then the kids that are already on track and excelling and they're trying to keep them engaged so they can go deeper and not slow down their learning. Um, I don't, I've never in the time that I've volunteered in the schools seen, you know, this idea that teachers are promoting ideology. I see teachers working their tails off, trying to manage 20 some wild little personalities and keep everybody on task, and they do an amazing job. So
That's true. And that's another issue is there have been teachers that vacated the Waukesha School District, either retired early or resigned because of some of the pressure they'd gotten, I think, from the board and the teachers. And how do we address attracting good teachers back to Waukesha schools, assuming that's still an issue or a challenge?
I mean, I think if you think about any workplace, that you've worked before, you want to be. Is he making
We're good.
signals at me?
3 minutes. We're good.
Okay. Oh, okay. Any workplace that you've worked at before, you want a place where you feel valued, you feel heard, you feel respected, and you have the equipment that you need to do your job. That's what I think about as a nurse. If
Okay.
I've left a hospital, it's because I didn't feel valued, I didn't feel heard, or didn't have the equipment that I needed to do my job. So I think if we can address those things, and as a board member, I would be wanting to get that direct feedback from the teachers,
Sure.
whether it was through surveys or just going and interacting and just seeing what are the resources that you need, what are the gaps, and how can we be supporting you better so that you can do the job that you do so well to the best of your ability. So,
That sounds great. And speaking of feedback, Stephanie, I know you're spending the rest of the day, the last Saturday before the election this Tuesday, hitting the bricks, canvassing, going door to door. And and I know you've done that throughout your campaign. What has been some of the feedback from Waukesha voters, from residents about concerns they have with their schools or ideas or recommendations?
I think a lot of people are concerned with the stuff coming down nationally with the push to close the Department of Education. They are concerned about what the impact will be on the local public schools. But we do hear all the time older people saying, I'm retired. I don't have kids in the schools anymore. I don't worry about the school board. And I think that the biggest message we've tried to spread is that local schools matter. Even if you don't have kids in the schools, even if you're retired, the quality of the schools and how they're doing, it matters tremendously for our community. It
Mm,
matters directly for the students that are graduating from these schools that are going to be members of our community, whether they're able to get good paying jobs, whether they're able to be productive citizens, but it also matters for your home values.
mhm.
You want your property value to be strong because people would want to move to Waukesha for the schools. And so I think that that's the most important message that we can impress upon people is that whether you have kids in the district or not, you definitely need to be paying attention
Sounds
to the
good.
local school boards and voting for people that are supporting public schools.
Sounds great. Final question, Stephanie. What is it you'd like listeners to know about Stephanie Fidlin and your candidacy that we haven't covered in this podcast?
I have been advocating for our schools, as a member of the PTO and doing things in the district and volunteering. And whether or not I'm elected to the board, that work is going to continue. And I will continue speaking up for our students, fighting for our schools, volunteering, fundraising, doing the work to meet the need and make sure that every kid has a great opportunity for a quality public education. So for me, that's not going to stop. So.
Sounds great. Stephanie Fidlin, candidate for Waukesha School District. Thank you so much for spending this Saturday morning with us, longer than you expected. Thanks for your
That's
patience and
okay.
indulgence. I want to thank the mighty Max Martinson for doing a great job in fixing some of these technical hiccups we had. Stick around for podcast number 2. Stephanie, good luck with the rest of your campaign, especially with today's canvassing, and I'm sure tomorrow's and Monday's. And to all our listeners, be sure to vote on Tuesday. If you don't, you are a fool on April Fool's Day. If you don't get out and make your voice heard, if you haven't voted already, please remember also that safety is everyone's responsibility. So are good public schools. So is and good mental health is everybody's right. Go Ramila Mahagav Goler and see ya.